Hello and a warm Collisions YYC. Welcome to my guest today, Mr. Jake Surrey. How you doing, Jake?
Not too bad, thank you, sir. How are you?
Man, I am fabulous, man. Thanks for coming on. I'm excited about this topic today because it lives and breathes in the world that you and I live in, which is the world of marketing and all the things that entails. But from a business perspective, the impact of what we're about to talk about is far-reaching. And if you're an audience of the show and you're involved, aware, or even curious at all about business transformation, it's hard not to think about the big ad platforms and the roles they do play in our lives, they can play in our lives, or they will eventually play. You recently wrote an article, and we'll put some links in here to it because I think it's a great read. And it starts off as Google having an identity crisis. So before we dive into that, so I want to hook my audience. Like this is going to be a good one. You are newly appointed as the director of digital at Clearmotive Marketing. So full transparency, you joined our team. I'm really excited to work with you. And also, I'm going to take this opportunity to give you the stage a little bit to tell us a little bit about your role, tell us a little bit about Clearmotive, and then let's jump right into this article.
Yeah, for sure. As you say, recently appointed as Director of Digital. So clearmotive is a full-service marketing agency focused on efficiency and effectiveness. And so where I'm joining the team is to really propagate that from the media and digital side of things. And how can we drive the best results for our clients as effectively as possible and provide data to back all of that up. Which is really critical, right? And, for many reasons, but it's the old John Wanamaker quote of, half the money I spend on advertising is wasted. The problem is I don't know which half. Over the last 2 or 3 decades, Google and the social platforms have made that less of the case. We can track everybody, we follow everybody around. However, that is changing a bit. And I think that's one of the reasons that Google are starting to... They may not present it, but they, I think, are starting to see some challenges to what has been a pretty unassailable moat in the digital advertising world.
So from the perspective of, obviously we've got AI, we've got SEO, search is changing, like so many things impacting. I feel this trend was already kind of going this way. And, people, we'll get into the article and we'll kind of jump around a little bit. Like they're a company, they're Alphabet. They need to show quarter over quarter, they need to show return to their shareholders. They need to show an increase, which sometimes we've all watched things like the Enron documentary. Like sometimes it can create bad behavior, maybe unintentional, but yet that can be the outcome. So when I get into your article, it really dives into that right away of like, hey, when we see this kind of massive year over year growth, we see that, advertising revenue of Google, like the chart you have over here from 2001 to 23, high and aggressively up to the right. Like any company, there's a maturity cycle. There's a level of like, oh, this isn't as profitable as it used to be. We need to get creative, ... So talk to me a little bit about kind of your perspective, or maybe even when this started to get on your radar, like, hey, there might be a trouble. There might be there might be trouble in Camelot. What's going on here?
I mean, often when people ask me what I do, I answer in a couple of different ways. And so one of them is, well, I help people sell stuff on Google. Or the internet, right? Like very simple.
Yep. Google being a big portion of that, I help you sell an internet. Google is a large player. Like it is the player in that space.
Oh, yeah, exactly. And, I'll also similarly describe myself as a proxy salesman for Google and Facebook and the other ad platforms. What I've seen over the years, I have been working in this space now for over a decade, 15 odd years, with an increasing focus on this. And Google dress things up in order to say, yes, this is for the best outcome for our advertisers. But I strongly believe, here's the thing, they want you to spend money on ads. Yeah. They don't care whether the ads are effective or not. So there is an inherent conflict of interest between an advertiser who wants to get the most return from their spend, whereas Google's objective is to simply have as many people spending marketing dollars on their platform as possible. My thinking at the moment is that they are struggling more under the surface than they would have us believe. And more than, we look at the stock charts, we look at their revenue charts, they're all pretty tickety-boo. But as soon as you scratch under the surface of what's actually going on, what their sales processes are, what some of the more technical elements of the ad platform and what's going on with SEO. It's important to differentiate between SEO, which doesn't directly make Google money. That's just optimizing your website so that Google likes it more and they rank you better.
That was back to, to organize the world's information. If you then play that game well with them and become the best answer for my search query as a user of the platform, I should then get served up the pizza shop down the street from my house, not the pizza shop in Chicago when I search best pizza. But that's an organic search versus somebody paying to show up in front of me and be very strategic or more deliberate about it from a dollar's leverage. And I appreciate a lot of people are like, yeah, I know how it works. But you're right. Acronyms get thrown around pretty loosely in any industry, especially in marketing.
Yeah, well, there's so many 3-letter acronyms. And I think that slightly sideways, but I think that like lawyers and accountants, marketers often try and hide what's actually quite a simple situation behind lots of terminology and vernacular. Anyhow, so I think both organic, search in general is being affected at the moment. And Google are actually maybe some of our listeners are aware of this, but they are undergoing a pretty significant antitrust lawsuit at the moment. Because they are a monopoly, their argument is, hey, well, there are other places on the internet you can advertise. But they have 90% of search engine share globally.
You can go to those other places, but don't worry, it won't be crowded because there'll be no one else there.
well, exactly. How many people use Edge? How many people actually use Safari? I don't know that there are that many out there. And
90-10 kind of sums it up. We don't have a monopoly, but pretty damn close.
They don't have a monopoly over digital advertising. What they do have a near monopoly over is search advertising.
Okay.
And they say it themselves. Recently, the documentation from the final hearing of the antitrust trial was released, and it made for really, really interesting reading. I'm going to give myself a little disclaimer here because I believe that the world is spherical. I believe in vaccines. I am not a conspiracy theorist, but when I
appreciate the clarification, sir.
Yeah, so I don't want it to sound too conspiracy theorist, but they actually say within the documentation that is released themselves that basically they've broken supply and demand, and that the business model for search advertising specifically is one of the greatest business models ever. And the quote specifically says, what has been so amazing about it is that we have essentially been able to ignore one of the fundamental laws of economics. Businesses need to worry about supply and demand. Because as we see more and more people go onto the internet to get information, and we should remember that the internet is still quite nascent. It's been around 30, 40 years with the level of usage it has. This is all still really quite new compared to the history of business overall, right? But they've been able to find this thing whereby somebody searches for the pizza shop, to your point. Well, if you can put an ad right next to somebody searching for a pizza shop, you're capturing commercial intent in a way that no other advertising medium ever has been able to. You do radio ads. Well, how do you know which people on, you're advertising your tractors?
Well, back to the 95.5, that the argument, especially in B2B, that only about 5% of your ideal target client is in the market at any one time. But when I search the pizza shop, I have just told the world, i.e. Google, that I am in market. And that is a huge differentiator for most of us. Back to your point about advertising that's been around versus I asked to see the solution you provide. I deliberately typed it in.
Exactly. And there's some really interesting questions around that sort of more broadly, like to what extent does Google control the information which we as normal outside of business and advertising, but when we search for something, they're the people that decide what information we see. And I think that's a whole other matter that isn't really covered in the antitrust. But actually, That's quite an interesting debate to be had. But going back to the lawsuit, the allegation here is that they have a monopoly or a near monopoly over search, and that they have been taking unethical decisions and using unethical practices in order to maintain that. So one example that is touted quite a lot, they give Apple $20 billion a year so that when you buy a new iPhone, Chrome is the default browser, right? And that's a huge amount of money. But obviously, about 50% of the phones around the world are iPhones. They want to make bloody sure that they are maintaining that fact. So $20 billion. Now, is that legal, or is that reinforcing a monopolistic situation? My view is, well, they are really reinforcing their market position. Here's the thing. They're not doing anything which... I don't think this is necessarily a question of ethics. They're doing what is right to build their shareholder value, to maintain their market capitalization. I think the question comes down to, are we able to regulate the internet? Are we able to regulate these businesses properly? And that is why I'm quite excited about the antitrust lawsuit. It could well be massively chaotic for me personally or professionally, right? And anybody who's working in this industry, because let's say the outcome of the antitrust lawsuit is that the advertising business is broken up from the search business, is broken up from, the software business and all of those different pieces. Well, that's going to be really, really interesting. And one of the benefits that Google has is the ability to tie all of those pieces together, right? And that's why another reason that it's so effective for us. So it will be really, really interesting to see how this pans out. I think in terms of the ability to regulate these businesses, we saw Zuck go in front of Congress a few years ago, when we had the allegations of election interference being pushed on Facebook. And the Senate literally asked him, so how does Facebook make money? And, there's that famous meme of, well, we run ads, Senator. Now, if that is the level of questioning that our regulators are giving, that is a very, very 101 question, right?
Yes.
If that's the level of understanding, sure, that's in America, but that's the level of understanding that our regulatory bodies are taking. Well, how the heck are we going to sort of regulate AI? This opens up quite a lot of other corollary questions. But I think it is very clear that Google do have a monopoly over search, or a near monopoly, and that they have taken pretty unethical practices in order to maintain that. And I think it's worth investigating why. And there's some things that we know, like we can read their annual reports, we can read the findings of the court hearing, and there are some pieces, without me wanting to get too far into the technical weeds and bore everybody who isn't involved in search advertising, but there are some things that they're doing which we see day in and day out, which in terms of some of their sales techniques, in terms of how they're managing the accounts, in terms of their interaction with advertisers, that are at best a bit disingenuous, and at worst they're, I would say, close to manipulating unsuspecting advertisers into spending money on stuff that is entirely worthless.
Give us an example, because nobody wants to spend any amount of money that's wasted. And back to your quote about 50%, I just don't know which 50%. Let's talk about some of these predatory tactics, like, give people a little bit of a watch list of things just to be aware of if you're involved in this, but not, you can be involved in it, but not be, and be far from an expert in it.
Yeah. And I see this all the time, and especially it's pertinent for smaller businesses. I would hope that larger businesses out there have either in-house or a partner who knows all this stuff, who holds a position of skepticism, who understands the ins and outs of the platforms. But what you have when you are setting up a new ad account, there are lots of recommendations around the settings to use that are automatically applied, and they have been putting more and more of those in. Now, here's the thing. When you leave those settings activated, they will waste money on non-targeted advertising. The beauty of digital advertising is that you can target very specifically, and therefore you can go, hey, I'm trying to target a Calgarian who's moved to London. Well, what you do then is you run some ads in London for people who, let's say you're doing it on Facebook, people who like Jerome McGinley and the Calgary Flames, for example. With search, you target by keyword specifically. And you can set the level of specificity to the keyword. So let's say you're selling some brown shoes. Well, you can have ads appear when only that term, brown shoes, is search for, and then your ad appears. Or brown lace-up shoes with rubber soles. You can set that. So the first one is exact match. Your ads will only show when an exact phrase is mentioned. You then have phrase match, which will then capture like close variants and longer phrases. And then you have broad match. Automatically, everything is set to broad match. If you don't change the setting, when I have looked at the kinds of searches that trigger the ad,
increase your volume and increase your spend instantaneously,
and on terms that are entirely irrelevant. So that is the problem.
Which is kind of defeating the value of what you should be to have access to from a transparency and a precision perspective on digital.
Yeah, and these settings are automatically applied and if you don't know, and some of them are really, really hidden away. There was one which I found, and I had to, and I use this platform every day. I'd say I'm a super user. I'm more knowledgeable around the platform than most people I know. There was one setting which was wasting a whole bunch of money, and I had to click through, and it was really, really hidden in sort of sub menus. So there's that piece. The other piece is, if we look at the different types of advertising that Google has available, so it's not just search, right? When you Google something, your ad appears. They also own YouTube. So there's lots of video inventory and banner ads. They also have lots and lots of ad placements or ad space that they own across digital properties across the internet where you can put banner ads in place. Now, banner ads are essentially useless. If you're listening to this, when was the last time you can actually even remember a banner ad that you saw, let alone click on it? But Google have got all of this sunk cost that they need to sell. YouTube, similarly, we don't go onto YouTube to buy stuff. We go onto, I'll use it professionally. I'll use it to watch sports highlights, game highlights, movie reviews, whatever it is. And actually, all of us just try and skip the ads as quickly as possible.
There's a difference between giving me the best answer to my query and interrupting what else I'm trying to do, right? If we just want to talk about the age-old challenge of advertising being an interrupter in your otherwise clear journey of what you wanted to accomplish.
So here's the thing. They've made these strategic business acquisitions. So they bought YouTube, that's 15 odd years ago, and YouTube is really profitable and YouTube has a huge amount of ad revenue, but it's actually really hard to attribute that back to revenue growth when you're running it. I still recommend it for clients because it does work well for a brand awareness play. But in terms of that ability to go, hey, I've spent 5, 10, 15 grand on ads, and I can directly see that I have then got 20, 40, 100 grand of revenue, and I can say, hey, my ROI is 3-1 or whatever it is. That's much easier to do on search. When you're looking at things like video ads on YouTube or display ads, what you're actually trying to do is go, well, I served this many impressions and had this many views on my ads, and I think that down the line there is an incremental effect on the search volume or people's propensity to buy my products. That's much harder to measure. But Google still want to sell it. And so they're now pushing different products that actually merge all of their different ad products into one. So there's one called Performance Max. Performance Max can work really, really well. My slightly conspiracy theory-esque opinion on Performance Max is that they are bundling everything together so that they can sell inventory on display networks and on YouTube that they weren't going to sell otherwise. And I think what we're seeing is their search revenue is going to be defined by how many people are searching for things that have commercial intent, right? So we know that the overall number of searches taking place every year is growing and growing and growing. Mm-hmm. But when you're advertising, you don't want to advertise against was episode 3 season 2 of The Bear good, right? Like that, unless you've got a really good reason to. You want to be advertising against terms with specific commercial intent. And I think what is happening is, although search volume is growing, I think the number of people that are going to Google with commercial intent is actually lagging. And going back to the court documentation, some of the wording that was put together, it was very PR'd, indicated that they are worried about that too, because we're seeing younger generations aren't actually going to Google as their first place to get information. They might go to YouTube, they might go to Reddit, they might go to TikTok. Mm-hmm. Young people probably aren't going to Facebook anymore. They might go to Instagram. And so I think Google are worried about that because the amount of the gold dust search volume, I don't think is growing as much as the more informational fact-finding searches, which are much harder for them to monetize. So I think they're possibly seeing a slowdown in effective search revenue, even though we know that they had more than $1 trillion spent on search in the US alone in 2023. My theory is that the rate of growth there is slowing down, and that is where they're trying to squeeze as much out of unsuspecting advertisers as possible. What you also have, so in the platform, you've got hidden settings that waste your money. At the same time, I get about 5 or 6 calls from Google reps a day going, hey, could I talk to you about your account? These sales reps don't work directly for Google. They are outsourced by Google. They have very little experience, and what they are briefed to do is try to get engagement, and they try and get advertisers to do the thing that Google wants. Once again, what Google wants isn't necessarily the same as what you should want as a business doing some advertising. And they can be really, really persuasive.
It's a boiler room strategy.
Yeah. And my view on this is why would they do that? Like, it seems to me as a business strategy to be much more about immediate revenue than lifetime value, because if you're persuading advertisers to do stuff that doesn't work, they're going to stop spending money with you in the midterm. Whereas if you partner with them and try and make sure that they're getting the best return, surely in the long term. But you know what? I'm not in charge of Google. And I imagine some management consultants have come in and said that this is the best way. And there's probably some calculation. But to me, it's always seemed very short-sighted to do this. Perhaps there are other reasons they're doing it. You know, they want to, like, they are pushing a lot more AI and machine learning within the platform. Perhaps a lot of this is to gather as much data as possible to therefore make the advertising more effective in the long run. It doesn't seem that way to me. So we've got this combination.
It still pushes you to rely more on the platform to make all the decisions for you and spend your money not always with potentially your best interest. Talk to me about just if everything, you know, if everything is accurate to where the way you're portraying it and the way you're reading the tea leaves, what's the impact? Like, does this by proportion really impact a small to medium sized business versus a large advertiser? They're spending $1 million a year on the platform. They've got a team. They know how to manage it. They're okay. I'm a small to medium sized business where maybe I'm spending $5,000 a month. Maybe I'm spending 10, but I'm not as sophisticated. Does it really alienate or really discriminate against one group disproportionately? Or is it affecting everyone across the board?
I think that for bigger budgets, you tend to have bigger, more experienced agencies, but it doesn't necessarily be agencies. I'm seeing a lot of in-house teams.
Yeah, there's a different talent potentially involved in the platform.
Yeah. But when you're looking at those level of budgets, I think the huge majority at a higher budget level, you're going to spend some money to make sure that it's managed properly, right? You've got a bigger budget available. What I see time and time again is for smaller budgets, and this is even up to 50, 60, 70 grand a month. A lot of those settings, we had an example with one of our clients here where it was quite a reasonable Google spend. It was 5 figures a month. Our director of marketing there went away on holiday, and the marketing exec got a call from a Google rep and listened to the Google rep and made a bunch of changes to our campaigns, thinking that was the best practice because Google had told her to.
Because Google called me, so I should trust the information. Yeah.
And guess what happened? The results tanked, and it took like a month and a half to recalibrate it because we could reverse the changes.
To un-F the account. Yeah.
Yeah, and we could reverse the changes. We could see what changes had happened, but the problem was it threw the machine learning off, which meant that it then took a whole bunch of time. So that's the kind of thing that can happen quite a lot. Unless...
Well, really... and just to really unpack what you said, the results tanked, but probably the spend didn't. The spend kept climbing or maintained.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think, they said, I don't think she changed any budgets because she didn't have the authority to do so.
Oh, I see. But it might have changed the rate in which the budget was spent or when you ran out of... Yeah, I understand.
Well, and we then went from, spending a certain amount and getting a certain ROI to getting very minimal ROI. But what Google got out of that is essentially more data getting pushed in and more engagement with certain, like Performance Max, which is the one I mentioned before that blends together. Yeah, there were quite a few changes in there that would have got Google more data, which is almost as valuable as money for them, but certainly like totally messed around. And the rep, who doesn't even work directly for Google, hit their KPIs of having a client call and getting adoption of whatever features within the ad platform they wanted. So I actually read a story when I was researching my article. I was on, there's a really, if you're into digital marketing or marketing, actually Reddit is quite good. And there's a lot of good subreddits for marketing. So I actually asked the question of what are the most egregious things you have seen from a Google rep? And I asked that in Reddit PPC. And there was one story that I came across where literally the same thing happened. A Google rep got hold of a client, made a bunch of changes to the account, and that the business, which was a junk removal business, literally went out of business because it broke the campaign so badly. So that is a real world effect. People lost jobs. It wasn't just money or the marketing budget getting messed up. That was a business going under and this also goes back to the monopoly point. Well, that business was so in tow to paid search because junk removal near me, they put the ad there and that is their business model. Well, the campaigns get broken. If that is 80% of their revenue coming from Google search, there's too much dependence there. Do you see what I mean? Now, Procter & Gamble probably don't need to worry about this.
If you're a larger brand and you've got more diversification and you appreciate that, you don't need every click to be a conversion. Like you said, it could be an awareness play, but it's a much more complicated multi-pronged approach than often small businesses that get so reliant on an external platform where you essentially have zero control except just to continue to spend money.
And so it is concerning, and it does have real world effect outside of, my little bubble of digital marketing, right? Which is only one bit of the professional and business universe. But we're seeing more and more of this. And for me, that's unethical. The way they're approaching it is trying to get, they're within their rights to do whatever they want with their product, right? I'm not questioning that whatsoever. But surely if you have this brilliant moat and you basically have this ad platform that you think has broken supply and demand, well, why then do you need to resort to these underhanded car salesman tactics in order to squeeze more money out of every single advertiser? Something doesn't add up there to me. And I think they're deeply worried about the antitrust lawsuit. None of us know what the outcome of that is going to be. I think they're also worried about AI and how that is going to affect their business. We know that Microsoft and OpenAI have a really, really tight partnership. And when Google released AI-driven search in the US recently, they had to roll it back because it was broken.
You've got a great little example in your article about that as well. Yeah.
Oh yeah, like there's one there. I mean, where they're telling people to try and avoid getting kidney stones by drinking your own urine. There was another pretty famous one, which was, what ingredient should I put on my pizza? And the suggestion was to put glue on the pizza. Yeah. So they know that they are behind on that compared to Perplexity, compared to OpenAI, ChatGPT, all of these guys. So I think they're under threat there as well. And I think that they are starting to be worried about that gradual drop-off of how many people are going on to search for stuff
just
that
from
they
a
want to buy.
Just from a generational evolution perspective.
Yes, there's that happening behind the scenes. The other thing that was really interesting is there's been some sort of senior management changes over the last decade or so at Google. And I don't know any of these people personally, and so this is where I'm speculating a bit. But you look at the backgrounds. The chap who's in charge of search, industry reputation is just to be a really nice, very smart guy, very technical, who was very on board with the mission of Google, how to organize the world's information as well as possible. And, really part of the whole don't be evil thing. His role was taken over by somebody who had come from Yahoo, previously worked at McKinsey for a bunch of years. One of my best friends is a partner at McKinsey back in the UK. I know there are ethical questions around McKinsey in terms of some of the stuff that they have done. Cough, Sackler, Purdue Pharmaceutical, all of that kind of stuff. But nonetheless, we do know that management consultants are all about business efficiency and monetization. This guy has come in, and I'm pretty sure that leadership change is what's driving some of the tactics that we're seeing as advertisers.
The opportunity beyond an article like this or a conversation that you're kind of sharing as like, hey, I really want to put this out to the world. There's not a lot of recourse as an individual who's, grown reliant on this platform when you've got that kind of a monopoly or just that much control of the market, 90-10. Aside from going, this is interesting, be ever vigilant, it almost feels like there's not a lot you can do, which is the frustrating place to be in, for an advertiser or someone who's spending money on this, seeing their costs go up exponentially and the results not go up in check to that. Like, just thoughts on how to kind of deal with that at any size of business, but especially small to medium sized.
Yeah, I mean, that's another thing that actually came out from the lawsuit and the recent court case is price fixing. So all digital ad platforms are based on an auction. So part of that auction and how that auction works is how much you bid. And then part of that is also the quality of your advertising. So in terms of the advertising creative and in terms of the website or page that you're sending people to, which is great because what that means is that you don't need to have the biggest budget to win, right? You can't. It's not just about who bids more. If your ad is better, and this is relevant to not just Google, but also Facebook, LinkedIn, all of these guys. They have a similar mechanism. What was released, and that's what we're all trained on, right? Like when you're learning digital advertising, hey, like there's something called quality score.
Are you serving up the best result for this customer's intent? Like ultimately, if you just want to keep boiling it down to it's a simple premise.
Yeah. And that is what we are led to believe as we learn, our set of skills and our
that
trade.
was often a bit of the value prop and a bit of the wow factor that was promoted, especially in the early days, right?
Yeah. Well, being who I am, and you know where I stand politically, like I always loved digital advertising because I felt it democratized advertising. If you're a little mum and pop sweet shop, you could have a free Google Analytics install and you could spend $500 a month on search and Facebook ads,
and capture
and it would
tons
help you
of
to grow
local
your business.
relevant traffic. Yeah,
rather than sort of going to Walmart to the sweet store, right? And I thought that was great. And it seems to me a lot of the practices and business decisions that are being made by the ad platforms now, a lot of which are being dressed up under privacy or, things like that, are actually not in the best interest of small businesses. Hey, and look at the metrics around small businesses in North America. It's 95% of businesses, right? Yeah. So in to answer your question, though, I know I went on a little bit of a tangent there. So the first thing to say is what did come out of the trial is Google fixed prices, which is interesting. So they actually showed internal emails saying, hey, our revenue is down in Southwest North America. What can we do? Let's increase our prices, which goes really counter to our understanding of here is the auction and here's how to sort of win with the auction by doing the best advertising possible. As a business, they can set whatever prices they like. The problem is going back to the supply and demand point.
You're talking at both sides of your mouth too, right?
Yeah. Well, as an agency, if we were to put our prices up so that they would quadruple what any other agencies were, guess what? We would have less business. Yes. There's supply and demand, Adam Smith's invisible hand. It works, right? The problem is that when you've got monopolistic power over that specific product, which is a critical channel to many, many businesses out there. I've got a lot of clients where if we turn the ads off, their revenue tanks by 80%, right? And that is the search ads. When they've got that much control and they can then fix prices, that creates a market distortion, hence the antitrust trial. What do we do about it? The important thing, I think, is to hold a position of skepticism against the ad platforms, by which I mean, don't listen to a word they say. Look at, find somebody who knows their stuff. Either hire somebody in-house, get a freelancer, an agency, whoever it is, who really, really knows the platform in and out. You can't do anything about inflation. Just as you or me, I can't pay less to NMAX every month. I've got to pay that amount of money. But what I can do is think about, well, what can I do that's, do I really need to have the heating on in that room? Do I really need to,
how do I ultimately increase my efficiency? That's a great, I can fix my windows. I can turn the lights off.
Right.
I can, control what I can control. Mm-hmm.
Yes, exactly. And I think you need to make sure that you have have resource in place to do those things. So that could be, okay, well, my cost per click is going up. I cannot control that. How can I make my website convert better? Or how can I feed the ad platform better data so that there is a higher propensity for the campaign to work well? It's all about maximizing probability in this game. There are some facets that you can't control. There are some facets you can. I think also paying very close attention, especially if you're a business that relies on Google for revenue. Make sure that you follow what happens with the outcome of the trial. It's going to be really interesting. It could be a big old hand grenade in the world of digital advertising. If we suddenly realize, hey, Google is getting broken up, that's going to have some pretty significant ramifications. So I think paying really close attention, but making sure that you have the right level of expertise. I'll often get people come to me, Jake, I've got a budget of £1,000 a month. Now, that's not the right fit for an agency. It's probably not the right fit for me as a consultant, but I have people that I know and trust who are really good, who do a great job of working with those kinds of budgets. So, but make sure that you have the right team in place in order to manage this effectively, depending on your budget, right? If you're a global business managing hundreds of millions on Google, you need to have a pretty big team in place, and you would hope that they've got very much dialed in order how to minimize wasted spend. But it is all about trying to minimize any wastage within the ad platform, And also where you can't control things, well, what are the other factors that you can control? Creative, you can control, the quality of your ads. You can control your targeting. You can control the quality of your website and your offer and so on and so forth. So, trying to wrestle back using some of the other areas of marketing that often get forgotten about. 5 P's of marketing, price, position, placement, all of those kinds of things. Well, work on those. And then hopefully you can curb some of the inflation and some of the shady, I don't mean to slag off car salesmen, but they're well known for
it's
engaging in nefarious tactics. You can try to counter some of that. The other piece that I would say is simply don't listen to Google reps. And if you are spending, you get the good reps. There are still some left if you're spending probably several $100,000 a month. If you're spending less than that, seriously, don't listen to what Google tell you to do. Get a second opinion. Because
it's self-serving. How, I guess this seems self-serving, but also maybe obvious. There's a lot of gurus out there. There's a lot of speaks with a forked tongue. You said, how do you then advise a company, like when they're vetting a partner? And for a lot of organizations, big, small, medium, they're not experts in this area. So they're relying on their partner to be an expert. Is it as simple as, who have you worked with before? What have you done? Like, how do you vet something like this that is so much more at first blush? It's kind of like, I heard it's compared to it's like blackjack. It takes 5 minutes to learn, but a lifetime to master. How do you vet that? And what are some of the watch outs that you look for? And you're a hiring manager as well. And you're out there often looking at like, who is the real talent and who's just saying they do the thing. Like, that's another concern to even get the right person on your team to deal with this very complex beast.
Yeah, I that's a really good question. And going back to my point earlier about how lawyers and accountants and marketers all hide under vernacular, well, guess what? In order to be an accountant, you have to have a CPA. In order to be a lawyer, you have to have passed the bar. In order to be a digital marketer, you need to have watched a couple of videos on YouTube and be able to bullshit your way into getting somebody to give you money to run their marketing. That is the problem here. What I would say is case studies and references are really, really helpful. I would also say that you do get what you pay for. Ultimately, I see this more and more, and it sounds obvious, but you shouldn't try and save money on the management side of things necessarily, because it's a service business and people will be de-incentivized for that. I'm not saying spend like a ridiculous amount of money on the management side, but make sure you get referrals, speak to referrals almost as if you were hiring somebody. Look at case studies, verify the case studies. If you have got a significant enough budget, get a second opinion. Like, I will get this quite a lot, actually, where somebody will come to me and be like, hey, I'm trying to choose somebody for this. It's probably not right for you. Could you give me a second opinion? You can find people who know about this stuff. And I think that is the only way to do it. The other thing that I always tell my clients is, there's no guarantees. I think anybody who tries to provide a guarantee in our world, I can't hack into a computer, get somebody to click on a mouse and buy your product for you, right? And anybody who's providing guarantees is basically saying that. So they're either so desperate for business that they're going to lie to you, or they're just lying to you. So I don't think, don't listen.
Choose your own adventure. Both went to the same spot on that. Yeah.
Right. And I think you can get a sense quite quickly. The other thing that I would say with consultants is, can you explain this as somebody who has deep expertise in a way that is understandable and comprehensible to somebody who doesn't have that deep digital background? And I think the ability to do that, if you're a business owner, a decision maker, you should hopefully be able to have a certain sense or judge of character. Sure, you need to validate it, but I think you should be able to get an understanding of, is this person full of it or not? Sometimes that's hard, right? But I think if they can explain exactly why they're doing things the way they're doing, they can explain their process really, really well, and also try and explain how this makes money, how that affects your business.
I like
that for me is a really, really good indicator that they're not just trying to fleece you for a few quid.
How do you tie it back to ultimately the needle we were trying to move in the first place, and what is that value and what is that cost per customer, and really understanding the metrics behind it? And a lot of times the conversation should start there before it starts anywhere else.
Always. Like, how, anytime that I'm talking to a new client, I don't really care about the marketing side. I want to know what the business, how does your business make money? Cool. Therefore, I can give you the best advice. And sometimes my advice is actually, you don't need any of the stuff I do. You should hire another salesperson, or you need to fix your website, or you need to, your pricing strategy is all wrong. Well, I don't work on that stuff specifically, but sometimes that's the best advice I can give them, right?
Well, that is the integrity of it. And it is just a channel. It is just one version of it. It's just played such a big role, and it's been so impactful in our society and as businesses. As these things change and as it shifts, like everything does, I really appreciate your advice of being ever vigilant. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that Google's not going to go anywhere. It's too big, too big to fail, like the banks, right? But I suspect we are going to see changes, both in their business model, in their pricing, and potentially in their overall corporate structure if Alphabet is broken up. And, it's not just, I know we need to wrap up pretty quickly here, but it's not just the ads. We've got SEO and we've got search to think about. We have all of their documentation. We have the whole analytics. It will be very interesting to see what happens with them over the next couple of years. So I think remaining vigilant, as you say, is the key piece of advice I can give anybody.
Jake, thank you for the deep dive down that rabbit hole of non-conspiracy, but hey, I'm concerned about this kind of thinking lines. What's the best way? I know you're a big LinkedIn guy. Is that your preferred for people getting hold of you?
Yeah, I think LinkedIn is the easiest way. I am the only Jake Surrey on LinkedIn. There is not yet an AI avatar of me on social media pretending to be me. Or you can get in touch at my email address, jake.surrey@clearmotive.ca. But yeah, hit me, if anybody ever has any questions about this, I'm always happy to help as best as I can.
Well, you're a wealth of knowledge, my friend. I really appreciate your time today. And this is an excellent article. We'll put the link in the post. And I really encourage people, if you're curious at all and want to deepen your level of vigilance, this is an article that's well worth a read. So thank you, my friend. And that was great. We'll chat again.
I'm sure we will, mate. I mean, we work together. So.
Truly. Thanks, mate.
All right, mate. See you soon. Thanks, Tyler.